Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and today it is my number 15 team in my 2023 NFL Deep Dive Series. It's the Pittsburgh Steelers. Make sure to hit the like, the comment, and subscribe. I want to hear all your thoughts on Pittsburgh. I'm obviously pretty high on them. I really like what this roster looks like. I just think that there's a little bit of a strength of schedule issue here in a very tough division that might hold them back just a little bit. And then, the quarterback play. They do have Kenny Pickett coming back for year two with a little bit of an upgraded receivers group with the addition of Allen Robinson. They added Darnell Washington, the giant of a man, in the draft. So that's going to be really interesting how they use him. I think he'll be used as a lot as a sixth offensive lineman. It'll really help out in the run game. And he's going to be a giant target in the red zone. And I expect him and Pat Freiermuth to be a really interesting combination, especially in the red zone. In particular, and I think that's really going to help Kenny Pickett's game out a lot. I think it's going to open up the run game a lot more, which is only good news again for Kenny Pickett, who is really, in terms of the skill positions, the only one that has any type of question marks around him. And coming off of a rookie season, there's always going to be that. You kind of look for bright spots throughout the year, and he did play relatively well. I mean, Pittsburgh is one of the best coach teams in the entire NFL, maybe amongst NFL history. Mike Tomlin is certainly at least top 15 head coaches of all time, you'd think, right? Maybe? I think so. The defense is always going to be there because of Mike Tomlin. They've made some very great additions, and they got the pick of the draft in Joey Porter Jr. I was screaming for him. You can go check my Giants draft reaction videos. I was screaming for him. We got Deontay Banks, whatever. But Joey Porter Jr. ending up in Pittsburgh is the most appropriate draft pick, I think, of all time. So good on them for him falling into their laps the way that he did. They also added a veteran, Patrick Peterson, who had a bit of a revitalization in Minnesota last year. He played pretty well. Definitely priced himself out of the market and playing in Minnesota again. Coming over there, and that's going to be an interesting mentorship that we're going to see as they improve. They also got Minkah Fitzpatrick back there. They added Keanu Neal, who's kind of going to be a linebacker hybrid. They drafted Nick Herbig, who's an edge rusher, but he's also kind of an off linebacker hybrid guy. So they got a lot of variety for them to play around with on the defensive side of the ball. And of course, one of the best of all time, best interior defensive pass rushers of all time, Cameron Hayward. And the guy that plays next to him, TJ Watt. Maybe you heard of him. Perhaps you have. There's a lot of good talent on this team. I'm really high on them. But again, they're in a rough situation because they probably got the number 4 quarterback in the division, at least on paper. And they are still seemingly at least a half a step below maybe Baltimore and Cincinnati. I think in Cincinnati, they're a full step below. Baltimore, they're a little bit more on par with them. I think that they could have a lot of success against Baltimore. I think they match up really well against Baltimore, which could really help them. The AFC is also so incredibly strong this year that they may be just a little bit behind because they will have some offensive line deficiencies despite adding Broderick Jones in the draft. It'll be interesting to see how they mix and match guys. Is Dan Moore going to be the third offensive tackle, or is he going to start over Okorafor? James Daniels is the guard. Then you got Siamalu, the other guard. Who's going to be the center? Is it going to be Dotson? Is it going to be Kendrick Green, or is it going to be Mason Cole? They do have the pieces, however, in order to make this work. It's just a matter of, are the potential upgrades of the guys that they have playing on the bench, perhaps, right now on the offensive line, going to make a significant difference if they become starters? I think that's the biggest question mark. The entire left side of the offensive line is completely brand new, though. I think that's going to be drastically improved. Perhaps maybe not so much in the run game with Broderick Jones, but that's, you got to develop these young offensive linemen, give them time. And I think that there could be some early struggles for him as well, playing up against guys like Myles Garrett, Trey Hendrickson, and then the platoon of guys they have over in Baltimore. Speaking of edge rushers, I don't know if I said this already. If I did, sorry for the redundancy, but I don't script this out. Baltimore and Pittsburgh, in particular, have been linked to a trade for Chase Young, the edge rusher from the Washington Commanders, who is currently playing on the 5th year. They didn't pick up his 5th year option. He's playing in his prove it year, I guess, before hitting free agency, potentially being franchise tagged. He has not been traded as of yet to either one of those teams, so Pittsburgh is not in play for Chase Young. They have extended Alex Highsmith, however, which the rumors about them being in the Chase Young sweepstakes came out after that extension happened. So it does make me wonder if they actually are even in the Chase Young sweepstakes here, and that they aren't just maybe in it to maybe throw a 4th round pick or a 3rd round pick just so Baltimore doesn't get him this year. That could be a possibility as well. I could see them being that petty and then having a nice, really healthy pass rush rotation there with a lot of different moving parts. But I haven't done the intro here long enough. Let's get into the grades here, and we'll start with one of the best coaching staffs in the entire NFL. So this is my 5th ranked coaching staff currently in the NFL. And the reason why they don't get a little bit higher is, I'll get to that shortly, but Mike Tomlin is really the driving force here. Like I said, he's got to be top 15 all time in terms of head coaches in the NFL. His longevity, his success, and it's not necessarily measured in rings here, because it's very difficult to win Super Bowls in the NFL. Not everyone's Bill Belichick and can win 20 of them. But it's the sustained success with a lack of talent on the roster, which we've seen as well. We've seen him take teams that people thought were going to be losing teams, and I don't think he's had a losing record in his entire career. Last year, I think they went 9-8. And they did that, I think, much to the surprise of a lot of people. I don't think too many people had them doing that. You know, with the rookie quarterback that had a lot of question marks around him, a lot of turnover on the roster, I think that people were really doubting this team, and I think that Tomlin and this staff really established themselves as being almost bulletproof in that sense. Obviously, you know, if they end up losing 10 starters, then maybe we'll see them take a bit of a nosedive, but I don't see that coming. I don't see that being necessarily realistic. His right-hand man is Terrell Austin, the defensive coordinator, who slid in, fit in perfectly right next to Tomlin the moment he got hired. He was a defensive assistant, I think, for a little bit before getting promoted to defensive coordinator. And he's done a really great job of applying Mike Tomlin's strategies and his maintaining the culture that Tomlin was brought in to maintain, which was that Steelers culture from Chuck Noll to Bill Cowher then to Mike Tomlin. He was amazingly the perfect guy for the job, and he keeps proving it every year. And Terrell Austin has slid right in, been wonderful there, and really made a great impact on Alex Highsmith last year, though I do think he screams 1-year wonder. They did extend him, so there's a lot of faith there as well. And he's done a great job of developing guys in the secondary. They brought out the best in Minkah Fitzpatrick when he was traded there, I think 2 years ago now, maybe 2.5 years ago he was traded there. I think it was 2019? It's 2019? Whatever. Whenever he was traded there. The reason why they're not yet, I would say, a top 3 is because of the offensive coordinator, Matt Canada. I don't hate him. I just think that if they maybe had somebody a little bit higher on the pecking order in terms of offensive coordinators, this might be the 2nd or 3rd best staff. Spoiler alert, the best staff is still Andy Reid and the Kansas City Chiefs, no matter what anyone says. But you got these guys, but if Matt Canada he's the driving force of the offense. It's not like the Terrell Austin position as defensive coordinator, because Mike Tomlin is a defensive guy. He's one of the few real strong defensive coaches that has succeeded as a head coach in recent memory. So Matt Canada has almost full control of this offense. Outside of culture building, he's the guy. And if he can pull some more development out of Kenny Pickett and turn him into, a top 15 quarterback this year, then this team's going to have a lot of success, and he might actually be somebody that teams look at to be a head coach in 2024, which I know some fans, even Steeler fans, are kind of like, there's no real chance, but teams are always looking for great offensive guys, and if he can bring that out of Kenny Pickett, you are at risk of losing him. So, but I also think that Matt Canada needs to drastically improve as an individual as well. Not necessarily develop other people, but develop himself to a degree. And have maybe a little bit more faith in a deeper passing game. You know, he does have the bodies out there. Deontay Johnson, George Pickens are tremendous talents. And also, how much more creativity is he going to come up with when he's got a guy like Calvin Austin III, who they drafted last year, who is considered one of the best undersized little slot gadget players who can really design things specifically to manufacture touches for him. All these things are going to have to apply. And then it's obviously, how much do you commit to Najee Harris in the run game? Also, making sure that you do make that commitment to the run game, because at the end of the day, in a cultural standpoint for this team, what drives them is their physicality. And that's always what's driven the Steelers teams. It's not a lot of flashiness in there. Yeah, they had Antonio Brown there for a bit, but it was driven by Ben Roethlisberger, who is the most rugged, outside of the legal issues, guys that you could have had as the face of the franchise. And then AB was sort of like your flashy guy in there. So you mix in the flashiness, but at the end of the day, what were they driven by? They were driven by the run game. They always made sure that they had a top-level running back on that roster. That's why they drafted Najee Harris in the first round, when many people would have argued that they had bigger needs. So Matt Canada does have his work cut out for him. He's going to have to find a good balance in the offensive scheme, and while also adapting his coaching strategies to be able to compete and potentially have to have an offense ready to go that can keep up with teams like within their division, Cincinnati, Baltimore, and even Cleveland, in terms of putting points on the board. Because they're going to have to score, I think, a lot of points if they're going to succeed even within the division, never mind within the conference that you still have offensive juggernauts like Buffalo, Miami, the Jets, Kansas City, the Chargers, even potentially Denver coming out this year, maybe potentially Jacksonville as well. So you got a lot of things you got to keep up with, and Matt Canada is going to need to evolve, for the lack of a better term, in order for there to be this amount of success and maybe a little bit more for the Steelers this year. So now let's go to the quarterback grades, and we got Kenny Pickett here. I give him a 74. His backup, Mitch Trubisky, gets a 70, and then Mason Rudolph, 58. Didn't work out. Oklahoma State, sorry. You and James Washington looked like it was going to be the 1-2 punch. You're not. Bye. Mitch Trubisky is actually a pretty solid backup. He didn't necessarily play bad last year. It was just one of those things, you knew that he was on a short leash where he wasn't going to be able to make a lot of mistakes, even a couple of mistakes before Kenny Pickett got in there. So that was sort of just, he was a victim of circumstance, I think. But Kenny Pickett coming in, I think he has the capabilities. I think he has the football IQ to be able to develop as a passer. And I think being in the same system and really surrounded by the same weapons, it's the same offense and the same players. So that is a really important thing for a young quarterback to have. And his offensive line is better than it was last year as well. So he's coming into a much better situation, even on paper, just based on the little improvements they made on the offensive line, especially in a pass blocking aspect, and the little additions that they made in terms of depth pieces like Allen Robinson, Darnell Washington as weapons. But it's the maintaining of the top guys in the offense that's really going to be something I think that will drive the development and accelerate the development of Kenny Pickett throughout training camp, and then throughout the season. I think you'll see him get better and better as the season goes on, barring injury and any significant issues within that weapon group and on the offensive line, of course. Another thing about Kenny Pickett is that he's quite the rushing threat as well, which as a young quarterback, that's a great weapon to have. He's not the most mobile guy in the world. He's not going to go out there and do what Lamar Jackson does. But if he needs to break out of the pocket, run and get a first down, make a guy miss maybe even down the field, he's capable of doing that stuff. He won't be doing any fake slides in the NFL because he'll just get destroyed. NFL players will not put up with that. They'll take the 15. So we're not going to see any of those things from him. But I think it's a really important skill that he has that's going to help this offense move along, even in moments where maybe the young quarterback mind rears its ugly head. And he's got some good depth in the backfield as well. Talk about Najee Harris, who's going to be that first and second down back. Turn around, hand the ball off between the tackles, get you 4 yards, get you 5 yards, and then maybe break off a long run in there. The Alabama running back mentality. Even Jaylen Warren, who had a bit of a breakout last year, at least as one of those change of pace guys, he'll be the guy that you'll see mostly as the receiving back. He's got tremendous abilities as a receiving back on third down. So I expect on those third and mediums, third and longs, he's going to be the guy that gets out there on the field, because you can do a number of things with him. You can hand the ball off to him. I think Anthony McFarland is another guy kind of similar to that in that sense. I think he's a step and a half below Warren in terms of his ability as a receiving back. He is a little bit better, I think, of an option than Najee Harris is out of the backfield as a receiver. But I think that Anthony McFarland can come in if he needs to be as that third running back in the backfield and actually be quite effective. Jason Huntley, I don't see him getting much playing time in the actual offense. He'll probably get most of his work on special teams. But I think between those three backs, you got a lot of potential there. I think you can throw in Anthony McFarland on a first or second down and hand the football off to him if you feel that you need to give Najee Harris a bit of a break. And then Jaylen Warren can still serve as your receiving back, so you don't have to waste his reps during a game on first and second down. You can hand that off to Anthony McFarland and maybe feel a little confident in that, at least almost equally as confident if you were to do it with Jaylen Warren. I think you want to reserve Warren again for the more true receiving back situations. But definitely one of the better ones out there. If he can repeat what he did last year, then he's definitely one of the better ones in the league. And his ability to pick up blitzes and help out with blocking, he had some really good moments there as well, looking back on some of those games. Now we're looking here at the receivers and the tight ends. We got Deontay Johnson, who has established himself as this team's number one receiver. I think he's a low-end number one in comparison to the rest of the league, but still a really strong wide receiver, a really versatile weapon to have. George Pickens, who they picked up last year, first-round talent, but, character issues made him slip in the draft into, I believe it was the second-round pick by the Steelers, but a steal nonetheless for them. He was the reason why they felt so comfortable trading away Chase Claypool and sort of giving up on that attitude, red flags, and handing those over to the Chicago Bears. And then they used that draft pick. I'm pretty sure they used that draft pick to get Joey Porter Jr. So to me, I would swap Joey Porter Jr. for Chase Claypool straight up any day of the week. Calvin Austin, you expect him to have a bigger role in the offense this year. Was drafted last year as well, along with George Pickens. They were really wide receiver needy. They went out and they got the guys that they needed, two different types of wide receivers. But I expect Calvin Austin to have a lot of manufactured touches. I expect him to maybe have 3 or 4 plays a game specifically designed to get the ball in his hands, maybe on some reverses, some bubble screens, even maybe some quick slants, quick outs, and if he gets an interesting little matchup, hot route him into maybe a go route up the seam is a possibility as well. You got Pat Freiermuth, who I expect to see a next step forward from him as well, kind of like Kenny Pickett. These are two guys that I can see them really growing together as the year goes on. And I think that with the compliments that they have in the depth chart, there's going to be a lot of room for Freiermuth to maybe be put in situations that completely and 100% suit his skill set, which is going to lead to more success. Because now you have Darnell Washington, who's basically an offensive lineman who can run and catch. He's an absolute monster, and you can throw him out there on early downs in the red zone, and you got a monster weapon there. And that's going to open up opportunities for Pat Freiermuth, because Washington's a bit of a matchup nightmare in that sense, because you kind of can't put a small safety on him. you kind of almost got to put an athletic linebacker to sort of mitigate the size discrepancy that is going to exist while also maintaining athleticism to be able to keep up with him. And that's going to open up opportunities for Freiermuth, who then in that situation, they're going to have no choice but to put a nickel corner or a box safety they bring down into man coverage on him, which is going to be tremendous for him opportunity-wise because he's going to be outmatching a lot of the guys covering him, specifically in those man coverage situations. Then you got Connor Hayward, who's sort of their fullback / tight end. I expect him, he's not going to get as many opportunities as he did last year, which were still few and far between. I think that his primary role that you'll see will be as maybe Freiermuth's backup in those situations. I think that you can see him on the field as a fullback, sort of H-back, a motion guy, cutting off some of those defensive ends with some wham blocks, that kind of thing. Allen Robinson, really the only true depth wide receiver they have. Miles Boykin, it's never really panned out for him. Gunnar Olszewski, he's basically your punt returner. You might get some opportunities for him out there. He's one of those scrappy guys. When you're a punt returner, you generally have that scrappiness to you anyway. But I wouldn't expect to get much out of him. So Allen Robinson, you're hoping that you're revitalizing the career. You're hoping you get, more of what you had, towards his end of the run in Jacksonville, beginning of the run in Chicago, and not so much what we've gotten lately from him, because he's really been somebody that's kind of dropped off the map in terms of his production and his reliability. But maybe in this situation where he's, the third outside wide receiver, basically the backup to Johnson and Pickens, maybe more to Pickens, he's going to be put in more opportunities, maybe eased into this a bit more, and hopefully put in position to succeed. And if he does end up, back to sort of where he was before, then you might have elevated this group to being the best receiver group in the NFL on paper, and that's saying something. So there's a lot of potential there. I wouldn't expect much though. After you get a couple years in a row of that stuff, it's hard to see the comeback happening. But I still think he's a positive influence in the locker room. I don't recall ever really hearing any character issues with him, and I think that could be something positive for a guy like George Pickens to sort of be a mentor there for him in his development throughout the year and into next year as well. So now let's talk about the offensive line in terms of pass blocking. The brand new starting left tackle, Broderick Jones, comes in. He's a 74 pass blocker. This is the strength of his game. It'll be interesting to watch him and his Georgia teammate Darnell Washington perhaps line up next to each other. That should be fun. And then Isaac Seumalo coming over from Philadelphia to be the left guard. So the left side of the offensive line completely revamped. Then you got Mason Cole at center, who I think is one of the two guys on the offensive line whose starting position might be in a little bit of jeopardy. There are other options there. Kevin Dotson and Kendrick Green, I think, are both going to be competitive for that starting center role throughout the season. Maybe more so Green than Dotson. We got James Daniels, who came over last year in free agency. So in the last 2 years, they've rebuilt the interior of the offensive line with these 3 pickups. He's basically established as the right guard on this team. And then next to him is Okorafor. It's Okorafor, whatever. This is the real competition between him and Dan Moore Jr. for that starting spot at the right tackle position. Kevin Dotson does bring a lot in terms of the passing game. We'll get to his contributions in the run game in comparison to Seumalo and James Daniels in a short while. But I do think that could leave him to be the third guard on the roster and have them be comfortable with him in that role. Kendrick Green really struggled last year. He was a starter in his rookie year. Him and Dan Moore came in together and played quite well as rookies. Dan Moore kind of stayed the way he was, which just wasn't enough to prevent them from going out and getting Broderick Jones in the first round. And then Kendrick Green lost out to Mason Cole, couldn't get a starting position as a guard and maintain it. He really just didn't have a great year and fell off a bit there as well. Nate Herbig, LaRaven Clark, they're sort of competing depending on how many offensive linemen they decide to keep. They might keep 9, which means I would put Nate Herbig maybe as the odd one out, because Green and Dotson can kind of play all 3 interior positions already, and those are the 2 guys I think are going to be kept over Herbig anyway. And LaRaven Clark playing the other tackle position, I think keeping 4 tackles and then 5 interior guys might be the way to go. What we do see is a drop-off in run blocking for most of these guys. The only one that's better at run blocking that's in the starting 5 is Mason Cole. Sayamalu's a little bit worse at run blocking than pass blocking. James Daniels a little less so, but still not as good. Broderick Jones really needs to develop in that sense. Okorafor is not good, which is where he could have his job in jeopardy, because Dan Moore, he is equal. I will say equal to him in terms of run blocking. And Dan Moore is a better pass blocker. So if Dan Moore is able to make that transition during camp to be an effective right tackle, then I think that he could end up being the guy that ends up the starter there. Kevin Dotson does take a significant step back as well as a run blocker, which in my estimation is what takes him out of the running of being one of the interior starters to start the year. Kendrick Green, again, he needs to really step up and prove that he's closer to what he was his rookie year than what he was sophomore year. And then there's just not a lot of depth in terms of run blocking, which is an odd thing to have based upon the culture that they built in Pittsburgh, which is hard-nosed running. But you can still develop Broderick Jones. You can see enough little improvements from the other offensive linemen where this could be still a very effective offensive line in both aspects of the offensive game. So just a quick positional summary. You see the quarterbacks, the receiving backs there, the wide receivers. They actually have some pretty decent depth in terms of the passing game at their disposal. And even in the run game, they have really good blocking wide receivers and blocking tight ends. That room, they're going to really help out with that and maybe make up for some of the deficiencies that the offensive line does have. You could put Darnell Washington on the right side of the offensive line on first down, and he's going to help out Okorafor and maybe make him a better run blocker, maybe make him a little bit more comfortable, help out, with some blocking with the defensive end, moving up to linebackers, helping out in that sense. And then having receivers who are able to crash in, hard-nosed wide receivers who aren't afraid to block is really important as well. So those factors could end up being what raises up this the overall run blocking ability of the offensive line, which could then drastically improve the ranking that's already quite good for this offense. So you can see it. This is my 6th highest graded offense. And that is and they have the 5th rushing offense, and that's with some deficiencies in the offensive line, because I do think they make up for it in a lot of good ways. They got the mobile quarterback. They got a really good first, second down running back with some depth. Wide receivers not afraid to block, one of the best blocking wide receiver groups, and one of the best blocking tight end groups in terms of overall top guy that they have, the depth that they have. The ability to use Connor Hayward as a tight end and an H-back as lead blocker in the backfield. There's a lot of really good potential there, even with the deficiency of the offensive line. If that offensive line comes out and we see drastic improvements from them, if you see them outplay their rankings, this could be up there with a team like, say, Baltimore as being one of the best rushing offenses in the NFL. They have that ability, and they have the mentality. I keep going back to the mentality and the culture to be that. They even have, to me, a top 15. They have the 14th passing offense, and that's with the question marks surrounding Kenny Pickett. Now, Kenny Pickett can outplay that ranking that I gave him and perhaps move this passing offense into being top 10. there's a lot. This is why you'll see these rankings that are come out. We'll get to the defense shortly. You're going to see this. You're going to be like, man, if they just if they were in the NFC, then this might be a Super Bowl contender quality team. But just based on the circumstances, they are a fringe playoff team somehow in the AFC, even with this type of performance. But there's so much potential here. Now moving on to the defensive side of the ball, and we'll start with the two purple numbers right there. 92 TJ Watt, 90 Cameron Hayward. One of the best edge interior pass rush duos in the NFL today. Probably the best one by my estimation. They're so good, and being able to move them around is going to cause headaches for every single offensive coordinator, every single quarterback's pre-snap reads. It's going to be a nightmare. They even added Keanu Benton to be another interior guy. You'll see some work there on third downs. And Alex Highsmith, who they just extended. One of the biggest advantages that they have with these two edge guys is that they really are the two best edge guys in every aspect of the game for this roster. So I expect them to get a lot of playing time together, create a lot of opportunities as well. And I think that's going to be a real positive for them. And then they even got some good depth pieces there. Talked about Nick Herbig at the top. He's an edge rusher, I think, on third downs. And maybe not on third down. Maybe on early downs you put him at edge because he's got like an off-ball linebacker kind of mentality as well. And then on third downs, maybe he plays off-ball linebacker on third down and you're blitzing him. He's part of like exotic blitz packages. They also have a veteran, Marcus Golden, in there, who's, on the downward end of his career. He still puts up really good performances just because he gets by on having so much experience and being great in the film room. I think that's going to be a really good spot for him to be in. Quincy Roche is another depth piece. Hasn't really worked out for him. You look at some of the interior pieces. DeMarvin Leal, who admittedly him and Benton are kind of the same. So that's weird. Montravius Adams also can contribute in the passing game. Larry Ogunjobi really the only one who's not that pass rushing interior guy. He's more reserved for what you have on early downs. So you can see here their defensive line against the run. None of the guys are as good. TJ Watt is not nearly as good. He's still one of the better ones, but not nearly as good as you would see him as a pass rusher. Cameron Hayward, sort of the same thing, but these guys are never coming off the field. Alex Highsmith, same thing, not coming off the field all that often. If there is going to be some sort of rotation happening on early downs, Alex Highsmith will be probably the guy that comes out over TJ Watt naturally. And then Ogunjobi comes in. He gets paid quite a bit of money. I'm just not that high on Ogunjobi, to be honest. I think that he's a little overrated. When you look at some of the depth here, they do have some really good depth at the edge. And this is what I mean about this is probably a situation where, though Highsmith is still the better option than these other three guys, I could see them reserving Highsmith in these, maybe on like a first, second downs, second and short situations, coming out and then putting in a guy like Herbig, Quincy Roche. Maybe I'd say Herbig probably most likely than not, because he does have the ability to drop back in coverage if you need to make that adjustment in pre-snap reads on the defensive side of the ball. So it'll be a lot more comfortable, I think, to make that move. But still some really good depth there on the edge for setting the edge on early downs in the run game, funneling those guys into those bigger bodies up the middle. But there isn't a lot of depth here in terms of the run game. Leal and Montravius Adams do not perform well on early downs. They did not have good performances last year. Keanu Benton coming in as a rookie, he's a little, he's going to have an opportunity to grow, I think, in like a base 3-4 formation. You'll see him playing some 5 technique with Hayward at the 3, Ogunjobi probably at the nose. So he's going to have opportunities to develop, but it's a concerning, it's a minor concern for me for this defensive line is on the interior with the depth aspect of it. Now we're going to the linebacking group, and they have 2 new linebackers there as the inside linebackers in this defense. They moved away from Devin Bush and Miles Jack, who they had last year, and they have a Landon Robertson, Cole Holcomb coming over in free agency. Neither one is great, but they are both solid across all 3 downs. And I think that's an important ability that they both have, is that they're guys that you can put them both out on the field, first, second, third down, and you know you're going to get the same level of production out of them. You're not going to take a tremendous step back depending on what the assignment is, if they're in man coverage, if they're in zone, if they're blitzing, if it's run support. Depth pieces, they don't really have a lot of depth at inside linebacker. They got Tanner Muse and they got Mark Robinson. Robinson's really just a complete special teams guy. He's almost a non-factor. Tanner Muse is good in the passing game, we'll say. We look at in the run support, Cole Holcomb is a little bit better than Landon Roberts there. They're sort of the same in the passing game and run game. I give Holcomb just a little bit of the edge there. But it'll be interesting to see which one they decide to keep on the field in the passing game. I think they can create sort of like an alternation there and not really lose a whole lot. Ride the hot hand, I guess, so to speak, in terms of the passing game between these 2 guys. But then you get to run game, Tanner Muse not nearly as good in the run game. He is an undersized linebacker at the end of the day, though. He's one of those undersized, extremely athletic, but he's one of those guys maybe just too big to play safety and too small to play linebacker, so he really loses something in the run game as an off-ball linebacker. And again, Mark Robinson, he's a special teams body. I would look for them to maybe add a couple of linebackers in free agency as training camp sort of moves on. I know they got probably a couple other guys on the roster, but none of them are really up to the level anyway. So including them in here, it's like, oh, they picked up 2 undrafted free agents at inside linebacker on June 17th. It's like, well, who cares? None of those guys are really going to make the impact, any different of an impact than a guy like Mark Robinson would as it stands right now. So they have to focus on maybe getting a truer depth piece that's a little bit more reliable, perhaps. So now let's go to the secondary, and we'll start with the pass coverage. It's the veteran Patrick Peterson there. He comes in with an 80. Just had a really good year with Minnesota. His age showed a little bit, of course, and I expect it to keep happening, but it's one of those things where he keeps working out hard, playing hard. His football IQ is so good, he's still going to find ways to be effective. Joey Porter Jr. playing for the same team his dad became famous on, sitting there as being the other corner out there, looking to really be mentored by Patrick Peterson. James Pierre made his name on special teams. I think we're going to see him get some opportunities here as a nickel guy. Minka Fitzpatrick, a tremendous all-purpose linebacker. You can play him deep. You can play him up close. Play him in the slot. He can do so many great things. I think his best position is playing, center field. But you're not going to lose a lot by putting him anywhere really across the entire defense, and that's going to give a lot of coordinators headaches. And then DeMonte Kazee, had a really decent performance last year that earned him a starting role in this defense. And then you look at some of the depth pieces here. They got some good depth in the defensive backroom. Levi Wallace, who was a starter last year, I don't think he's up to snuff, to be honest. He could potentially perform well in training camp and get some reps out there, but they did also draft Corey Trice Jr. In this year's draft as well. So the opportunities are going to be less and less for guys like Levi Wallace. Chandon Sullivan brought in. He's going to be more of a special teams guy. But that does earn him a roster spot here. And then I talked about Cam O'Neill in the intro being really just a threat. He could be a guy that he could come down, play some like money back role, linebacker role as well. He can become part of that three-man rotation, 4-man rotation perhaps, with the linebackers in the passing game. Trey Norwood, depth piece at the safety position. Now we're going to take a look at some of the run support. We'll start with the safety group. Like I said, Minka Fitzpatrick, you can put him anywhere. Kazee, he is better in run support, but the two of them together, you got a great safety group there. That's a great safety group for run support. That's really going to help out with the defense. And then you got James Pierre, who's got that special teams background, not afraid to stick his nose in there, got that grittiness, a Pittsburgh Steeler type attitude. Even Patrick Peterson still has a little bit of that dog in him. Joey Porter's going to need to develop it. He's going to, talk to your dad. Talk to your dad, get some of that dog in run support. Because of the five, he definitely is the worst at the run support. We'll see what kind of dog he can bring out in the NFL. Levi Wallace did play well, though, in the run game. So maybe on early downs, as they're working Joey Porter into his NFL career, maybe Levi Wallace gets on the field in that sense as one of the outside corners on like a first down, second down. And then Joey Porter comes in to handle some of the coverage if they get a good matchup and ease him into the NFL perhaps. Corey Trice, again, him being brought in, he's got a real opportunity as well, just because he does have such good ability in run support to perhaps take some starter reps as well on early downs. I think for sure he's going to be an immediate positive special teams contributor. Ken O'Neill does take a giant step back in the run game. Trey Norwood kind of is what he is in that sense. Shannon Sullivan sort of, again, same in the pass game. In the run game, he's mostly there as going to be a special teams guy. He'll probably get some reps as a nickel or a dime corner as well. So just running through the positional summaries again, that front four is going to be dangerous on third down. They're going to be able to pin their ears back and go after them, and they're going to have the playmakers on the outside to be able to make plays on the ball, to be able to play more aggressively on the outside. You're going to have Minka Fitzpatrick being able to play super aggressive on the outside like he has been. And they have some pretty decent depth across the board as well in the passing game. Then you go into the run game. At the edge position, again, they still got some really good depth in the run support, and they have good run support from the two top guys that they have. They lose a bit there on the interior. Not a lot of interior ability there in the run game. That's going to have to improve. Maybe the linebackers are going to have to, step up their game a little bit in that aspect. But then they got the safeties. They got Kazee and Fitzpatrick, who has two safeties and run support, can actually come up to the line and actually really lay the boom down, make some sure arm tackles as well. And then they even got a little bit of corner help as well to help set that second edge in the event that the offense gets around the outside on the front four. So kind of in the opposite realm as the offense, the sixth defense in the NFL by my grades, and they have the fifth pass defense as opposed to the fifth rush offense. And Joey Porter improves a little bit. Maybe Levi Wallace takes a little bit of a step up. Kind of like their run game on the offensive side. This could take some steps up there and be in that, that number 3, number 2 range. And the rush defense, kind of like their passing offense, to me, it's really determinative on one aspect of that group. For the offense, it's obviously Kenny Pickett and a bit of the offensive line. On the rush defensive side, it's that interior group that does grade out quite low. Outside of Cameron Hayward, they don't have a lot going on there. And Cameron Hayward's age, you might want to get him off the field a little bit on early downs, especially as the season goes on. So you got to hope that you get some development there. Logan Joby maybe takes a step up. Keanu Benton develops a little bit. Maybe you look for a more traditional run-stuffing interior defensive lineman to have as a depth piece to then give Cameron Hayward those extended breaks, so to speak, later as the season goes on. Because again, the age is going to catch up to you eventually, and I still think that if you have the opportunity to get Cameron Hayward off the field in clear rushing situations, like a second and short every now and then, first down, second and short, stuff like that, I think that it'll open up the ability for him to be more effective and help with the pass defense, which ultimately is what's going to drive your defense to high levels of success. So taking a look at their schedule, I do expect there to be certain growing pains that happen in certain games. I still think Pittsburgh is kind of like they were last year. They're one of those teams where they'll win games they shouldn't and they'll lose games they shouldn't. I think that's sort of, again, going to be their MO throughout the season. I do have them. I think they can beat Baltimore twice. I really do. I think they match up well with them. The likelihood of that happening the way that I pictured it, probably not. But then, I had them also losing to Houston, losing to the Rams, losing to the Colts, losing to Green Bay, and losing to Cleveland once as well. So maybe they sweep Cleveland and then split with Baltimore. Maybe they split with Cincinnati and split with Baltimore and steal a win against Cincinnati. I think these are all possibilities for them. But I think 9-8 is just about where this team should end up come the end of the year, because it's still playing in the AFC, and then to draw the NFC West to get San Francisco and Seattle to have to play them. That's a tough one. That's a tough draw for a team that was already going to have some schedule issues just based upon how strong their division was. So just a quick summary, 9-8, third in the division, 9th in the conference. So just short of a playoff berth, 15th in the league. They have the 5th best coaching staff, 6th offense and 6th defense. They do have some concerning deficiencies in the run defense and in the pass offense, which could ultimately lead to their demise in an environment where they're playing, again, really difficult teams quite often. And I think that it could unfortunately wear them out. I think having a high-level running game, as that wears out throughout the year, could affect them. And I think not having a particularly strong interior defensive line game to defend the run as the season goes on, that could affect them as well. So again, it could go a 1-game swing to 10 wins. They're 10-7. They could be a playoff team. So it's really close. We're getting into that area where it's really close. We're one game going the opposite way of what I've predicted. Just one of them changes the entire face. So it's tough. It's tough, but this team, they're so close. They are so close. And there you have it, my number 15 team, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Thank you for making it this far. If you have made it this far, please hit the like button. It's really going to help out with the algorithms. And leave a comment also. It's really going to help out with the algorithms as well. This helps grow the channel. Even if you don't like it, hit the like button and then leave your hate comment in the comment section below. That's a good compromise. You help me, and you also get out your frustrations and all the assessments that I may have made. And subscribe if you haven't already. That way you don't miss any of the future videos that I have. The ones I've already done are on either side of my head. So you can go there and watch those at your own leisure. And I thank you for coming. And I will see you next time with the next video.